can get away with just about anything as long as you don't get caught. This is especially true with crimes. Leave no trace and it's like the crime never occurred, except of course for all the criminal activity that has happened. The one thing you don't want to do, you never want to do, is be caught on camera, or even worse, immortalized on Google Maps for all the world to see. These 10 times, however, someone surely didn't get the memo or didn't realize it was the Google Maps car driving through town. From a 22-year-old sunken car to a not-so-high-speed chase, all the way to a potential murder with no resolution, you'd be shocked and surprised to find just how much of the world has been documented without even realizing it. Here are the top 10 crimes caught on Google Maps. Imagine thinking you'd gotten away with something only to realize 6 months later, not so much. In 2013, an SUV was stolen and found half a year later on Google Earth. The landowner discovered it and had been surveying, not realizing what the car was. At first, he thought it might be an illegal hunting hut. I can imagine if you didn't put it there, the idea of someone using your property without you knowing might be kind of terrifying. Especially if it was the type of person who would illegally set up a hut to hunt out of. With that being said, I bet it was a relief to learn it was just an SUV dumped in the woods. No squatters with guns there. It's hard to find a bike thief after the crime's been committed, but not so hard when the offense is caught on camera. The bike owner in question this time was not only stolen from, but the criminals dragged him off his bike beforehand. Luckily, due to Google Street's view car, the cops could use the photos to ID the criminals and arrest them. It's hard to say what's better, the fact that this happened by chance, or the swift, unquestionable payback they got. Hopefully, the guy got his bike back and they hadn't sold it. Before we go on, like this video, pop the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell right now, or the ghost in your closet will manifest itself tonight. Sometimes, you can do everything right and still end up losing. In 2013, Oregon police saw something a bit off on Google Earth. Needless to say, when it zoomed in, they were in for a big surprise. What they found was a marijuana farm hiding in plain sight. The satellite photos caught the criminals when no one else could, because the unique bird's eye view exposed the illegal activity. Hard to see what they could have done better here. Now, it wasn't entirely illegal. The location in question was a registered medical marijuana grow site, which allowed for something of 30 plants in the space. That being said, they found 3 times that many in the raid. Though the thing about this bust is it set a new precedent in 2013 that hadn't been used before. It was just the tip of the iceberg in Google Earth being used for law enforcement purposes. They still needed to go about everything else legally. Still, upon further inspection, this is a bit of a weird gray area. Now, police are using this technology, that's one thing. What about governments? I suppose it's not that easy to spot a tax evader in the streets, but how about from satellites? Being a country with strange and dangerous reputation, from within, of virtually everyone cheats, virtually everyone evades taxes doesn't bode well for social programs and other government-funded activities. In a sort of pledge to save the country from collapse in 2010, this was the frontier. Videos taken from above, sometimes via helicopter and Google Earth imagery coming together to root out these evaders. And how exactly was this being done? I mean, they'd hide it, right? Wrong. Private swimming pools were the tip-offs. Using the combination of images, they were able to find the villas owned by the doctors, lawyers, and business people had vastly underreported how many pools were in the area, from the reported 324 to a whopping 16,974. And that gave them a place to start. It became clear this is not indicative of what these people were supposedly earning, sparking a widespread investigation to root out the crime from its sources. If only they'd had fewer pools. One-time honored tradition, and popular prank by children, is the act of TPing someone's house. It's when you litter someone's property with unwound rolls of toilet paper for the uninitiated. It feels like a goofy prank until you realize someone has to clean it up, unless they want to pay the HOA fees that a messy property will incur. Don't get me wrong, but it's a few crimes at once: trespassing, destruction of property, and littering, to name a few. But maybe someone saw it as a work of art, and what better way to appreciate art than to immortalize it forever online? Maybe not forever, but at least for quite a while until Google reevaluates the area. Sometimes, the thrill of a crime is in the chase, and it's fantastic that this series of images was caught online for all to see. To add to the ludicrous nature of things, this was caught after an actual jewel heist went awry. The perps were then forced to make a break for it or get caught. You see police chases in movies all the time, but they're never quite so glamorous in real life. It may not have been a high-speed chase like some you'd seen before, but you can't blame them for not being Hollywood. The unfair pursuit and documented in series, frame by frame, following, they were eventually apprehended. But this had to have been the most exhausting day for these officers. Who goes into work expecting cardio? You might think you're sneaky, especially in broad daylight like this. But someone should have probably chosen a better meetup spot. In this case, all it took to find this drug deal was one Reddit user feeling nostalgic. He wanted to check in on Google Maps about this old drug pickup spot, only to be surprised with photos of a deal in progress. It just goes to show how sneaky the Google van and subsequent images being taken are. In this case, it was through a chain link fence at his old spot. But it would be funny to point out that this is hardly the first time it's happened. Maybe more careful, guys. Now, we've heard of open carry laws across the US, and people certainly do take their right to bear arms very seriously. But the difference is, as Google Maps highlighted, is being caught doing it on camera. From one person being caught pointing his gun directly at the moving vehicle to a casual display of another man's handgun in another, it's a bit ominous to see them, even if these men were entirely within their rights. We don't know the open carry laws in their state, so it very well may be. Still, this might not be the best look for you on Google Maps. Some crimes go unreported and are left cold. William Moult was reported missing from Lantana, Florida in 1997 after having failed to come home from a nightclub. A missing persons case was filed, but ultimately with no leads was left to go cold. 22 or so years later in 2019, the man's body was found in an underwater car in Google Maps. It may not be the happiest resolution to any crime out there, but at the very least, they can rest knowing what happened. This in and of itself may not be a crime, rather than a case of someone potentially drinking and driving, or some other cause that didn't involve foul play. Either way, without Google satellite images, we may never know. There have been plenty of wild and downright insane things caught on Google Maps. But what about a murder? Many users of Reddit speculated on this photo of a supposed splatter and drag of what appears to be blood on a deck in Norway. Still, we can't know for sure. Given the location, many people can only view this particular spot from Google Maps, rather than investigating into the gruesome scene themselves. As theorized by blood pattern specialists, what's potentially happened here is an impact and drag splatter pattern. It's consistent with examples replicated in labs, to the extent that it could very well be. But in this case, instead of answering questions or solving a crime, Google's imagery leaves more questions to our imaginations. What do you think? For all the excellent Google can do and the fantastic tools Google Maps and Google Earth give us, it's also a bit disconcerting just the level of surveillance it implies. If you ever feel like it, maybe you can get away with something. Your best bet is to look at the skies, or keep an eye on your surroundings if you're near a street. The truth is, the world is always watching, even when you least expect it. So while we are not telling you how to commit a crime, seriously we aren't. If you're going to, you might be better off just knowing your surroundings just a little bit better.